Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. My name is Fiona and I am an artist and illustrator based in the Pacific Northwest. Today I am going to be going through this sketchbook. I started this November in 2022 and I finished it just a couple months ago. This is an Etchr Everyday sketchbook. This is one of my favorite sketchbooks. It's 100% cotton watercolor paper, so it's very smooth and it's really great for mixed media. So for this spread, I think that I was looking at some Pinterest photos. I was exploring with mixed media and interiors, and especially thinking about textures and patterns as well, which is something I'm drawn to. And so I was using some soft pastel here, and this paper definitely holds soft pastel a little bit better because it has more tooth. And on this page, I went through a phase where I was really obsessed with drawing rabbits. And so I was experimenting with, again, more mixed media and like how different materials interact with one another. I think something about rabbits just feels very nostalgic for me, and I just like the characters that you can make with them. I feel like their faces are very expressive. So this page got a bit smudged, but to some extent I just kind of stopped caring about that kind of thing because it's not going to be a final work. So things are just going to get smudged together. And then I did a crow with, I think I used some pan pastel down on the branch, and then I used gouache and like colored pencil. Some of the pages I think I intended on doing something on the other side, but I kind of like the negative space. I think if I had extended this branch just a little bit more, it could have been really interesting. I think that something I forget about in my sketchbook is composition, and I'm trying to get better about that because sometimes it's great to just not think about anything and just kind of draw whatever, but sometimes it's nice to think about the composition of the page because it's good practice. And then this was something I had found on the website Map Crunch, and it basically just drops you down in a random place in the world, and then you draw that. And so I decided to give it a shot. I think I had maybe set a timer for myself with this, and when I first did this, I hated it. I thought it was so weird and ugly, but looking back on it, I actually really like the simplicity of it. I think there's so much texture here that's interesting, like layering of stuff. I don't really honestly remember what I did. I know there's gouache and colored pencil. There might have been some soft pastel or pan pastel here, but it just feels very kind of like naive art or like rudimentary, and there's something very like tactile about it that I like. And then this was an experiment that I did where I was trying to understand the differences between watercolor and gouache. And so on the left, besides the cat, I think that was just watercolor. But on the left, I used watercolor, and then on the right, I used gouache. And so I just explored like what process you use in terms of layering color and stuff to get to the same goal, and what kind of mood you can achieve. So this was a really interesting experiment, something I would totally recreate at some point. And honestly, it's hard to decide which I like better because there's parts of each that I like. So maybe that's something, or like a sign for me to combine the two rather than keeping them separate. I like the smoothness and kind of gradation that watercolor can provide, and then also the, opacity and the more textured part of gouache. And I just love this cat. I love his little face, and it looks like he only has 2 legs, but we're just gonna ignore that. And then these were just random pictures I think I found online. This was acrylic gouache, I think like Holbein acrylic gouache, and I put the foreground in first and then added in the background, like the dark background, just to kind of experiment with shape. But this was a little bit of colored pencil, I think. And this was just a whole mess of stuff. Honestly, I don't know. I go through phases of drawing certain animals, I think that's a theme, because I was drawing the rabbits for a while, and then I think I switched to bears as well for a while. And I got really into drawing bears and their environment and their habitat. So this was just a whole bunch of materials that I do not remember what they were, but I like how the water turned out, and there's kind of like some highlight here, which is interesting. And then for this page, I painted outdoors. I mean, it was raining that day, so I actually was sitting in the car, but I was able to park and just look out onto the river and just draw what was in front of me. And I think I had used soft pastel and gouache and just kind of colored pencil again, and just kind of layered things together. And I like how this turned out. I feel like it feels kind of cozy, or I'm not really sure, but I love going to that spot. And then this was a master copy that I did of a Manet painting. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I can put it on the screen, but it was originally in oil paints, but I did it in watercolor and colored pencil, which was a really interesting challenge to do because you can't get the same opacities. You kind of have to layer the colors and then use the colored pencils to kind of get that opaque look. And then these were just experiments I did with wet into wet watercolor, and I just kind of threw everything, like I just kept adding color to get these interesting landscapes, I guess. There's things I like about both of them. They're both kind of a vibe. Again, I hated them at the time, but looking back, I'm actually really like them. There's something about the colors I really liked. I kind of wish I knew. I'm guessing this is burnt sienna, this kind of orangey color, but you know, I feel like sometimes you just need to give your work time and you need to take space away from it to be able to fully appreciate or like take something away from it. And then this was just drawing in my backyard. This was my cat, you know, just basking in the sun, trying to get the shadows. And then this was just a little scene. I think this was the hose outside and our little planter. And then the fence outside and, you know, trying to get movement and shadow. Just, it's an interesting page, I guess. I don't love this one, but I kind of like this part. I think value, I was trying to work on value here because that can be tricky. I can often overwork when I'm a piece, when I'm trying to get the value right. When I had a teacher tell me this past semester that sometimes you don't need to focus so much on value because you can use line and that helps define shapes as well. So that kind of changed the way I view things rather than just focusing solely on the value. And then this was a little quick self-portrait I did, you know, not just kind of in like a cartoony style. And then this was another study I did of the illustrator Felicita Sala. Not totally sure how to pronounce her name, but I love her work. So this was from her book, The Hideout. She's a children's book illustrator. And I did a study to kind of see, how does she use form or color and her use of line. I didn't really realize how much some of my favorite illustrators use line. And so I just did an experiment to study this piece and how she uses like she varies her line color when she does outlines. This was another experiment with value and with different materials as well. I think this was watercolor, gouache, and maybe acrylic gouache or acrylic, maybe just gouache here too, I'm not really sure. None of these were very successful, but I was trying to learn something from this. And this is just some random dog that I drew in these colors. I think I must have had like extra color or something that I was messing around with. And then this was a creepy wooden rabbit that I actually have this wooden rabbit I have. And again, I was probably back in my rabbit era. And so I was working on value. There's some harsh lighting. I think this is cool, actually. It's just kind of creepy looking if you don't really know what it is. And then this, I don't know. I think I was trying to draw something out of my mind. I must have cut something out I didn't like. I don't really know. Again, this is me trying to be loose and free. I was probably feeling really stuck with what I was doing, and so I was trying something here, and it, did it turn out? I don't know, probably not, but I probably got some sort of emotion out while doing this. And then I was experimenting with just laying down color and shape. So I was looking outside my window and then just focusing on color and like really bright colors. I think I was looking at some other painters that were doing something similar to this. So I was just trying it out myself. And I'm realizing I really love primary colors as well. And so I was probably leaning into that here. This was another map crunch session that I did where I timed myself, and I think I used, besides this background, which I think I did gouache, it was all Neocolor crayons, which I never do, so this probably was colored pencil, maybe a little bit here too, but yeah, I mean, I was just trying to push myself to try something new and like see what kind of result I could achieve with materials that I don't solely use. And then this was from it was from a Patreon Zoom session, but I can't remember whose it was. It was either, because I think I was following Emma Carlisle and Sarah Dyer at the time, so it was from one of them, so it was a timed drawing. And I like these ducks a lot. That's probably my favorite part. I kind of like this part too. If it were just this bottom part, I would like. But yeah, I like their little orange beaks. And then this was also from a Patreon session. So it was a quick, drawing. I think I was trying to, with these last ones, I was trying to not be so precious with this sketchbook. I had been really, holding back. And that was also probably like the start of it was probably this, where I was just thinking like, I need to use my materials. I need to use my sketchbook. And so this was probably the progression of just using it for quicker things. I don't have to like labor over everything I do in this nice sketchbook. This is more wet into wet practice, kind of like I was really liking that naive style and these kind of dots. I really like how this turned out. Like, it's kind of weird, but this is my favorite. I think was my favorite color. Some of these are my favorite colors in here. I love this kind of cobalt green color. This is probably yellow ochre, and it's like magenta color. So it's interesting to look back at sketchbooks and see patterns in your work. This was another, I think this was from a Draw Brighton Patreon class. So it was like a figure drawing class. This was probably a shorter, like medium one maybe. So don't love how this turned out, but I kind of like the interesting texture down here. I think that's kind of cool, but I don't know, not my favorite. And then I hadn't used this sketchbook in a while, and I kind of went back to it, and this was in my backyard, and I drew this. I think I hadn't painted anything for a while, and so I just sat outside, and I was finding that it was much easier to just sit in my backyard and paint what I saw, because you just kind of look, I didn't really think too much about composition. I just kind of went for it. And this was all watercolor. I was trying to improve my watercolor skills, but I think something I was noticing during that period is that I was sticking to getting too held back by realism, maybe, because in my mind I associate watercolor sometimes with realism or something like that. So I was trying to, but I mean, I did learn a lot. I got more familiar with the colors and figuring out how I personally want to use watercolor in my work. And this was continuing that as well. This is again in my backyard. I was testing some colors and testing some compositions. I actually really like this little thumbnail here as like an abstract kind of vibe. Like the colors are interesting. There's something there. Sometimes my thumbnails I like the best. But yeah, so this was a view from my backyard and play with color. And then this, I think I was kind of getting to the end of the sketchbook and feeling a little wanting to be done. So I was just kind of drawing little scenes from my backyard again. I tried painting my sister. It kind of turned out, something. And this was an interesting color theory exploration, I suppose. So yeah, there's little, those little dandelions when the fuzz and the fluff, is let go. That's definitely what that's called, but the fluff. And then the rest was just swatching. I think, I often do that where it's just random color stuff in the back. I mean, it's nice to know how your colors interact on the paper that you're using, especially new materials. So I don't know exactly when I finished this. I think it was sometime in July of this year. So, I mean, I had this going for almost 3 years. But I think it was because I was so nervous to use it and I was just holding myself back. But I have another one that I was using. I actually lost it. I don't know where it is. It's driving me crazy. But I will find it and finish that one hopefully soon. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and if anything that I took away or would want to share from the completion of this sketchbook is that you don't need to be so precious with it. Make messes. That's what your sketchbook is for. They are made to be closed and put away on a shelf somewhere. They are not intended to be put on display. So I hope that helps. I will have a new vlog for next week, so I will see you then, and thank you for watching. Bye.